Hi everyone, David Aragona and Mike Beer here, taking a look at one of the two graded stakes on Saturday at Fairgrounds. Race 11 is the Grade 3 Louisiana for the older horses, going the mile and the 16th distance on the turf, the same distance as the Lecomte that we'll see for the 3-year-olds in the very next race. 10 signed on for this Louisiana, Mike, and I think the horse to beat is right down towards the inside. No surprise, coming from the Brad Cox stable. Hit Show, who kind of quietly had a pretty nice season in 2024, winning several graded stakes races, and now trying to add to that list here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, listen, he's hardly a superstar, but he's pretty good. And this just looks like another really, really good spot for him. More than anything else, this horse was pretty good at 3. He got better at 4, and he was just really, really well managed by Cox last year.
Hit Show usually ridden from somewhere in mid-pack, a horse that likes to get at least some pace to close into, so we'll see the Timeform US pace projector and whether or not that will be the case for Hit Show here. And it does feel like there is a fair amount of speed in this race, Mike. The number 3 Pipeline, with the game plan with him, he can only be successful when he's on the front end. Track Phantom has plenty of early speed, and horses like Cook Creek, Komino Amo and Makx Bay, they've all been forward in several of their starts.
Yeah, true enough. I mean, I did kind of feel like ultimately the 3 and the 8 were the 2 main speeds, but there are other horses who could maybe be looking to get involved early here.
Let's begin the conversation with that morning line favorite, the number 1 Hit Show. And, Mike, this horse I feel like wasn't really on a lot of people's radars for much of last year as one of the best older horses in the country. And I mean, his best achievement was just a couple Grade 2 victories in the Lucas Classic and the Fayette. But I mean, he held his form pretty well throughout the season, just kept showing up, bringing his lunch pail, taking home checks. I will say the knock against him for me is that he's coming off one of his worst efforts recently in the Clark. That was a race that didn't feature a whole lot of pace, and he was sort of behind horses at the alter course and upper stretch, but I didn't love the way he was drifting out through the lane, got rightfully disqualified that day for fouling another horse. Just didn't feel like he was really on his A game in that spot, but if he was coming in off any of his efforts prior to that, I'd view him as pretty formidable in here.
I'm not going to disagree with any of that, David. I mean, I feel like it's fine if you want to go back to the Clark and say, listen, he wanted to come up the inside at the top of the stretch. He really couldn't get through there. And so then he had to alter looking for a lane. Maybe that's all true. I'm kind of with you. I feel like he didn't really have that much. And I'm just not sure how much the trouble actually cost him in that race. But you're right. Everything he did prior to that just makes him, I think, way the horse to beat in here. And I think that includes the Fayette. His figure regressed in that race, but I thought he was much the best in that field.
The number 2 is Warrior Johnny, and kind of a tough horse to assess at this level because he's run some big speed figures on a few occasions that would put him right in the mix here. He was so impressive when he won that optional claiming race at Saratoga in July of last year, but he's raced a lot since then, trying Stakes Company on a number of occasions, just doesn't really seem to stack up with these horses at the graded stakes level. And, we saw him try some tougher company last time in the Tenacious, chasing home Saudi Crown, was never really in the mix, didn't look like a threat that day. Got a big buyer two back, but again, that was against much weaker at Parks.
Yeah, I personally, I've seen enough of this horse in graded stakes races. I just don't think he's this kind of a horse. He ran okay last time in Tenacious. I thought he got a really good trip in that race and wasn't even close to good enough against a graded stakes quality horse in Saudi Crown.
Feels like at this stage of Pipeline's career, he just really needs things his own way on the front end to run his best race. That was the case 2 back when he was able to set an honest but moderate pace at Churchill Downs and just spurred away from that field late, beating a slightly weaker group that he's meeting here. Last time in the Cigar Mile, I don't want to be too hard on him because that was a really tough spot, probably more like a Grade 1 affair than the Grade 2 that it's listed. And he set an honest pace that day and just kind of one pace through the stretch, hanging on his left lead. I just don't totally trust him at this point in his career to take pressure and win a graded stakes race.
I don't either. I spent some time, mostly in 2023, but I spent some time trying to make this horse a graded stakes horse, and it just never happened for him. I feel like ultimately he's just not that good, and if he doesn't get loose on the lead, I don't think he's going to be able to beat horses like this.
The number 4 is one of 2 Robertino Diodoro trainees in this race, Heroic Move, coming off a stakes victory at Zia Park. We'll take a look at the replay of that stretch run. And, Mike, there really wasn't any pace in this race. They went pretty slowly up front. This horse was back in mid-pack early, made a really nice move to the quarter pole, and you had to like the way he's striding out to the finish line to run away from these horses, obviously beating a weaker field than he meets here. But you go just 3 starts back, and he ran Hit Show to a half-length decision in a stakes race in West Virginia. So he's got some credentials to hang with these horses, just not the most consistent sort.
Yeah, just thought he was a really tough call in here. I'm not betting him off that race that we just watched right there, David. That was just a very, very soft field, and he was better than those horses. If you go back to that Governor's Cup 3 starts back when Hit Show beat him, not that hard to watch that replay back and say, if you reverse the trips, this horse beats Hit Show in there. This horse was wide all the way around the final turn. Hit Show got a perfect trip up the rail and just beat this horse. But then they come back in the Fayette. This horse was terrible in that race.
The number 5 is Skinner, who is another one that's going to be looking to launch from towards the back of the pack. That is just the way Skinner runs. He's a one-run closer, and we'll take a look at him actually getting the job done, visiting the winner's circle once again for the first time in a long time, last time out in the Grade 3 Native Diver at Del Mar. This his second start off the layoff when he was still in the John Sheriff stable, and got a solid speed figure here, 95 buyer, nearly back to the kind of numbers he was running during the height of his 3-year-old season, but still don't think he was beating the toughest group on this occasion. Now the Connections have made a decision that they're going to transfer him out of Southern California now to this venue with new trainer Cherie DeVoe, and they'll throw up a DRF formulator fact for Cherie DeVoe, who, as we were saying before we discussed this race, Mike, very easy to find positive stats for Cherie, and that's the case with this one. First, after a trainer switch on the dirt, she's had a lot of success doing this. 7 for 28, 25% with a $5.03 ROI. Some horses that have paid some big prices making the switch into her barn over the past few years.
Yeah, don't think this horse is going to be a big price in here, but we'll see how they wind up betting it. Listen, he's obviously got some talent. The running style to me is problematic because he doesn't have a lot of speed. He's still, even in that replay that we just watched, David, where he got the Grade 3 win, still doesn't change his leads through the stretch, something that he's never done. We'll just see. I mean, I can't say I'm a huge fan of his. He is third off the layoff here, and it's not like he's found a super tough spot here. He can obviously win. I'd be reluctant to take any kind of short price on this horse.
The number 6 is Cook Creek, and he's one that had plenty of success when he was initially claimed by the Mike Maker barn. Earned a 98 buyer first off the claim for them with an impressive victory during the summer at a time when his ownership, Flying P, just seemed to be delivering nothing but performances like that with the horses they put on the racetrack. And he held that form well right up until the Lucas Classic when he gamely fought Hit Show all the way to the wire that day. But what happened last time in the Clark, Mike? Because he was right on top of that pace. It went slowly. It seemed like he was in position to strike on the far turn, and he just had nothing left for the stretch drive. And it makes you wonder if maybe he's starting to go in the wrong direction again.
Yeah, I'd be worried about that too, because you're right. I didn't see the excuse for him last time. He sat right up there, and he was just no match for those horses through the stretch. A real step back as far as his form goes. They got this horse good. He is one of those horses that I don't. It looks like he really, really improved for Maker off the claim. But this is a horse, if you go back, he had some potential early on. So it's not like that improvement came out of nowhere. He's just a horse you're going to have to wait and see if he can bounce back in this race. I wouldn't be taking 9-2 on him.
The number 7 is Velocitor. And like a few horses that we've discussed in this race, he's got a few speed figures that put him in the mix here as being on the fringes of one of the contenders in the race. But just coming off performance in the Tenacious last time where he couldn't really hang with the likes of Saudi Crown and a couple of others that are coming back in this spot, was a little wide around the track, and maybe that took away from his finish a bit, but he just had nothing to offer through the lane that day. And the times that he's run against truly legitimate graded stakes competition just feels like he's maybe a cut below those horses.
Yeah, he's not the only one in this field who has that problem, we'll call it, going for him every time they step him up into tougher races. It just feels like he's not good enough. He didn't run well last time. It was off of a little bit of a layoff there, so maybe he needed it, but he's going to have to run the race of his life, I think. He will be a good price, though.
The number 8 is Track Phantom, and he is a horse who participated in the 2024 Kentucky Derby and really ran nothing but competitive races with the best in that 3-year-old crop right up until Derby Day. And, he's a horse that has a lot of early speed, Mike, and kind of got this reputation as being this one-dimensional front runner heading into the Kentucky Derby, and then was involved in that pace that ultimately did fall apart on Derby Day. But he had run some nice speed figures during his 3-year-old season, and now he's coming back third off the layoff, got the sprint race in for his return, probably needed that one. Last time out in the Tenacious, I don't love that performance, but watching the replay, it just feels like this horse got really tired in the last 8th of a mile. And if you like him in here, I think the hope is that he just got a lot out of that race and is ready for a better effort third off the layoff.
I couldn't put any better. That's exactly how I looked at him, David. The same exact way. I mean, I feel like off of the 7 furlong return from the long layoff, you feel like maybe that was the race that he needed, and then he would get better in the Tenacious. And for whatever reason, that didn't happen. I thought his 7 furlong race was good off the layoff. And you're right, he got really, really tired last time after, listen, a good horse in Saudi Crown just sort of pressed him all the way around the final turn, and this horse just threw it in late. But I'd be willing to give him the benefit of the doubt for that one because, listen, I was a fan of his as an early 3-year-old. I never thought he was going to be successful in the Kentucky Derby. I understand why they took their shot at him. I think this horse has a real chance to improve as a 4-year-old.
The number 9 is Komino Amo going out for the Robertino Diodoro barn. And Mike, if you just look at this horse's line of Beyer speed figures, I guess you could make the case that he's supposed to be one of the favorites in this race because he's run some of the best numbers of anybody in this field. But you start to look at where he's earned those figures, and his 2 best Beyers of 102 and 99 were achieved at Lone Star Park and Delta Downs against competition that is weaker than what he's facing here. And I will give him credit because he actually ran a lot better than I would have expected last time, cutting back to 6 furlongs in that Thanksgiving Classic behind some really nice sprinters. It's kind of hard to peg where he fits against these horses going 2 turns on the dirt.
Yeah, I agree. He's to me, he's another tough call in here. Just one that ultimately I just don't want to bet him because he has speed figures that suggest he's a contender in here. I get it. Maybe he'll run one of those, really fast races and he'll be competitive right down to the wire in here. Just feels like he's moving up significantly in class here. He was behind Hit Show and Heroic Move and that West Virginia Governors last August. I didn't see his excuse in there. He had every chance to win. He wasn't good enough, and he's got those 2 horses to deal with again.
The number 10 is Makx Bay, a bit of a wild card coming into this race. I recall he was entered in a Derby prep. I think it was maybe the Southwest last year, got scratched. I think he was a vet scratch that week and just hasn't been seen ever since until he returned last time at Fairgrounds coming off that 10-month layoff to kickstart his 4-year-old campaign and got the job done. Not quite as visually impressive as he had been in that 10-length allowance victory prior to the long layoff, but did beat a good rival in Snead last time out. I will say, watching the replay of that return race at Fairgrounds for Makx Bay, what struck me most about him was that he just hasn't really developed physically. He's a very small horse in stature, and you can kind of see in the stretch run of that race that Snead sort of towered over him coming to the wire. So I wonder if he's really taken that physical step forward, and I think he's going to need to if he's going to run a faster speed figure here.
Yeah, and he didn't. I guess the post position draw didn't do him any favors either because he wants to be forward and there's plenty of speed to his inside. So we'll just see if it all works out for him here. He's very lightly raced. He has been, pretty impressive in the 2 most recent wins. He's got an awful lot to prove here.
Let's throw up our picks for this Louisiana Stakes. And Mike, it sounds like our thought process was pretty similar with the number 8 Track Phantom.
Yeah, I feel like we probably looked at him the same way. I'm hoping that he isn't a need the lead kind of horse, David. I really don't think that he is, but we'll see how they decide to play it in here. He'll be forward. I think he's got upside. Hit Show's the horse to beat. I don't really want to bet him at a short price. I was looking for alternatives, and Track Phantom was really the only one I could get to.
Yeah, both Mike and I acknowledging Hit Show is the horse to beat, but hoping from a betting perspective, this is the right time to strike with the number 8 Track Phantom. 8-1-5-4 for me, 8-1-10-5 for Mike in the Grade 3 Louisiana Race 11 at Fairgrounds on Saturday. Good luck if you're playing the races this weekend.